Stocks, bonds, ETFs, straight out of downtown Chicago. This is Zacks Market Edge.
Welcome to Zacks Market Edge, the podcast about investing in your life. I'm your host, Tracey Ryniec, and this week I'm joined by two of Zacks' financial writing interns who also happen to be millennials. I'm joined by Ryan McQueenie and Andrew Steele. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
This is their first time. Good. Welcome. This is their first time in the studio, but we're going to talk about millennials, obviously, and investing. So I recruited them because they both are millennials, as I said, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about whether or not millennials are even interested in stocks, in the stock market, anything going on with the stock market. And just for clarification, millennials, I guess now are still 20-somethings and I guess kind of early to mid-30s almost now. It's almost getting to the point where there's going to have to be another generation after the millennials because it's so large. Yeah. So there is a big, different group in there. But we all like to lump everybody in the same thing. So I do want to say I'm not a millennial. I've said this before on the podcast. I'm a Generation X. But back in my day, when the dot-com boom was going on, at least in college, and even a lot of, 20-something people were really into the stock market, obviously, because the dot-com boom. And they were day trading. That was a new thing back then. There were a lot of easier, cheaper accounts, like the $5 or $10 trades where you could trade on your computer. That was all new. So it made it all easy. And they were in their dorm rooms and in their apartments, day trading and buying stocks. And they were totally involved in that whole world. But it seems like that is not the case anymore. So Ryan, let's start with you. Like, what are you and your friends? Do you care about stocks at all? Do you discuss it?
So I think it's interesting that you said the dot-com boom kind of sparked the interest because my first kind of thing that I saw in the financial world at all was the economic collapse in 2008.
Right.
And I think a lot of people my age are on the opposite end where it's not the dot-com boom inspiring them to trade. It's the 2008 collapse was this first thing they ever really noticed, and it's like terrifying to them.
Okay.
But yeah, I think people are interested in it, especially people that are studying finance. It's definitely a conversation I have still with a lot of people. And I do think the cheap trades thing is making a comeback as well. Everyone that I know that is a millennial that does hold stocks uses like some sort of application that offers $5 trades, $10 trades, or trading for completely free. So,
do they trade on their phones?
Yeah, that would be. I'm not holding anything right now, but I have an app on my phone with my account, and I would never go on anything other than my phone to trade.
Okay, that makes it even easier.
Way easier, yeah.
Now, what about you, Andrew? Do you know anyone who's like actively investing, or what did the 2008 collapse do to you and your friends? Was it the similar thing? Did it make you scared?
It's not also being scared. Also, keep in mind that a lot of the bankers, investors, the speculative ones, really got the brunt of the blame for that market collapse. And a lot of millennials, I would assume, would be like, don't want to associate themselves with the stock market with them. And not only that, there isn't the amount of money being generated around for millennials as well. The median income has decreased since 2000. Student debt has escalated completely. So millennials don't actually have money to actually invest anymore in anything.
Right. That would be the other side of it. It is a little more difficult, especially when you have that kind of like student loan debt and,
exactly.
The job might not be as good.
And with that, so the idea of even talking about stocks to invest into, it just isn't a discussion. It's more of, I got to get rent money. I got to pay for transportation. I got to do all these other things besides actually investing. So the topic of Wall Street, it only comes up in a negative light, saying like, how can these guys, screw us over that way? So
I think there's a lot of distrust. I would agree with that. And I would also agree with that broke college kid stereotype has never been more true than it is now. So
really,
I
thought people had moved out of their parents' basements, though.
That's actually not.
No,
true.
They're still living there.
Oh
wait, you have some stats?
I do have some numbers.
Okay.
So back in, where do I have it? I'm sorry.
That's all right. It was what-
Okay, here we go. So there's between the ages of 18 and 34 in our population, there's about 73 million.
okay.
That would be
Wow.
so we'll generalize that as our millennial generation.
Mm-hmm.
30% are living at home currently between the years 2009 and 2013 from the most recent stats from the Census Bureau. Just back in 2000, that was 23%.
Right, that was the .com.
Right, so
Yeah.
more millennials
More
are
people
staying home primarily because of cost. Because
Right.
so the median income right now is at just over $33,000 per year. And if you want to extrapolate that and add some context, $15 per hour at 40 hours a week, and if you work 52 weeks, it's just over $31,000. So
And then you have the high rents in all the major
yeah,
cities.
exactly.
The
So
rents
you
have
have
really exploded.
rents exploding, you have all this. So, and then you also have the population living in poverty. 20% of millennials right now are living in poverty compared to 15% back in 2000. So millennials aren't, people in like the 20s and coming just out of college are not making the same amount of money, and they just can't afford just regular basic cost of living compared to just 10 years ago.
Okay, so I'm like really depressed now.
Yeah.
Well, it's
I'm like, I feel bad for all of you.
I think I think that's the obvious reason why there probably just is a little bit less interest or a little bit less actual activity with millennials in the stock market. Is like they would see it as something that you do with extra cash,
Right,
and no
and they
one
don't have
has
it.
extra cash. Yeah.
That makes sense. Even with these low cost trading, though, I know that there's some of the programs that let you do, $100 here, $50 there, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
That isn't even enough to get them off the sidelines, or not
Um,
really.
I think, in my experiences, that is what I have done. Like
Okay.
very low amounts of things.
Right.
With a low cost trading service. Actually, the app I have on my phone is free.
How do you get free?
It's
That's
I can plug
amazing.
the app. It's called Robinhood. It's
Okay.
a free trading app, and they charge for other things. And basically the idea is it's an app. It's all online. Their staff is very small, so their overhead is tiny, and they are able to just kind of the bulk of the trading is free on it, and then they charge for like international trades and stuff. That's where they
Okay.
get their actual operating revenue. But yeah, it does encourage, when you can trade for free, now all of a sudden I can buy less and still be able to make some money. But I think that it really for me would go back down to like, I think people our age just don't trust companies like they used to, and they
Yeah.
don't trust the markets like they used to. So
Yeah, like back in the day, I mean, Microsoft could do no wrong. Bill Gates, when he was still the CEO, was on the cover of every magazine. Same thing kind of with Steve Jobs, but now he's left us. I know Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook is big in the news, and they show him like jogging over in China and all that stuff. But he doesn't seem to have the same kind of, some of these people were put high up on a pedestal back in the 90s, and that does seem to be a little less now. I don't know if you're
Also,
noticing.
even with just the extra money in these sort of like low trade stocks, you mentioned like if you have an extra $50, you invest that $50 and say that stock only increases about like 5-10% over the week. So all you actually did was make $5,
Right,
and
right.
you could have used that $50 to just say go to a really like cool restaurant with a couple friends or grab a
Eat,
couple drinks and
survive.
Yeah.
and do things like that where there's more an experience-based memory etched in you instead of
Right.
just saying, "Oh, I made $5 in the week." It's
Maybe-
like that's not a lot.
And that could even go back to some of the criticisms I think I hear of the millennial generation is I think it does hold to be true that we're kind of an instant gratification generation. I think we've grown up with everything being able to get everything as quick as possible. And so that just leads you to when you use your money, like you want the return immediately. And I would rather go out and spend money on a night out like that because I'm getting that experience than put it away for something that, sure, it'll grow and I'll have more money 2 years from now, but I want that money now. And maybe that is a generational thing. I definitely hear that as a critique of our generation sometimes.
Well, it makes sense because of the huge boom in Twitter and Instagram, where we're getting instant, like, not just feedback, like
News.
instantaneous, like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm experiencing at this moment, at this time. So just the concept of putting $100 away, even in a savings account, where, say, the interest, you get an extra like 4.5 interest per whatever the rates are. That's just like, why? Sort of like, it doesn't make any sense because there's other things I can do with that money. Where
So millennials won't necessarily be funding their 401ks anytime soon.
I don't think many millennials have a concept of what a 401k is.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Is
Most 20-somethings don't, though.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
That, and no matter what generation. It's hard to think, oh, wait, I need to put this away because in 45 years I might need this money.
Yeah.
That's even for everybody, I think, really long out there.
But I also wanted to touch on how you mentioned like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram being kind of the cause for that instant gratification culture. Because then you step back and think about when we talk about those services, those are also like public companies that people invest in a lot.
Right. So that brings up another question. If you're so into those kinds of things, why not invest in it too?
Yeah.
Or does that not even cross your mind? Because that used to cross our mind in the 90s. Like, oh, I use this pets.com. That was this crazy pet delivery service that went under and had this cool sock puppet. And, oh, I love it. It's cool. I'm going to buy that stock.
So I think it's interesting because, from my perspective, it's almost millennials have a unique opportunity to be these days investing in things that they've been using always. Like, so I've always used, I can't even remember when I wasn't using Amazon, or I can't even remember when I wasn't using Twitter. I can
Netflix.
a little bit when I was younger, but then you think about, well, Amazon's only started turning profits recently, and Twitter's obviously been struggling over the past year or so. So it really isn't as easy as, I use this all the time. Because then when you look into it, okay, so these social media companies or these e-commerce companies, their margins are really thin and they aren't super profitable, and it isn't as easy as, I use this, everyone uses this, it must be such a good idea that makes money.
What about the entertainment type stocks then? Because some of those, I'm talking like restaurant stocks or maybe even travel stocks. If the millennials want to capture the experience and they're doing all these things, maybe they're eating out at the Shake Shack when they can afford to spring for those burgers. Why not invest in those?
A lot of that has to do with these the entertainment stuff. Is a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like a phase. It's because there used to be like a cupcake phase. Then there was a donut phase. Now there's like a gourmet burger phase, even though they're not really gourmet in a sense, but usually we go through periods of having these specific restaurant, whatever's in. So if you got in on Shake Shack early as they're expanding, then you did well for yourself, but it's going to level out or at least decline eventually when the new phase comes in.
The buzz will wear off.
Exactly.
Like the frozen yogurt buzz already wore off.
That's true.
Yeah,
Froyo was huge
That's
last year, and now it's not already. So
so it's one of those sort of things where it's not actually a wise investment unless you're in already early for those sort of stocks.
Wow, so you guys are
about
kind of
trends.
jaded.
Well,
or you're very cautious. Let's just put it that way.
It's more caution than jaded. Being jaded,
And I do, not to keep harping on the same points, but I think it goes back to just, there's not a ton of trust of really any of these institutions, and then culturally our generation feeds off trends like that. So
what about the old industries? I mean, I know you don't use them, but like the railroads or things like that. Do you have, or General Electric? Do you have any interest whatsoever in investing or knowing anything about what's going on with those industries?
I mean, not to be just completely blunt, but no, and I don't know anyone that would have any interest in that. I think for me, especially when you think railroads or whatnot, or one that comes up a lot when we're writing is mining stocks, and it feels to me it feels really old, and it feels really, really out of date. Like to me, Apple is an old company, and I know people in our generation or the generations above us saw the majority of their life there wasn't an Apple. Well, Apple's been around my entire life, so That's an old company to me. That's a tried and true company, is something like Apple. As opposed to those way older companies, those way older industries. I've never used, I have even no concept of how those things work.
So you'd have no interest in investing in any of
Yeah, they're
those.
just not interesting to me. And I regardless of whether I, use something, I definitely, if I'm going to invest in it, I have to be interested in hearing about it at least.
So do you have any conversations with any of your friends ever about what's going on Wall Street?
I do personally. I think it stems from the fact that people know that
You do
I
work
write
at
here,
Zacks, yeah.
and so when people are interested in it and that comes up, we'll have a conversation.
Now, we just recently had a big pullback in the stock market to start this year in January and February, and a lot of the older Generation X and baby boomer investors got really nervous. Did that make you nervous after what you'd seen in 2008?
Yeah.
I would say yeah, and especially because I don't think millennials have that much control over the stock market. So having two generations really dictate the monies going around in the stock market, which then trickles down into the real economy. And it's like, what's going on? Why? It's just so frustrating because we don't have that sort of power to. We have a large purchasing power because we have a large population, but we're not actually investing into these companies. We're not even taking the time to actually look into it.
From my perspective, yes, that pullback at the beginning of the year was terrifying. And I think anytime you start talking about, is this going to be a bear market? Is, this record-breaking start to the year on how bad it was? I mean, it's definitely scary because, like I said, the first real thing that I ever saw or learned about the stock market was the 2008 just collapse. And that was historically bad. And so I think I'm already a little bit, it gives me anxiety a little bit where I'm just like, is this happening again? Obviously, was historic for a reason, as in it doesn't happen a lot and you hope it doesn't happen a lot. But I guess
it did define your generation.
Yeah, it did. It really did. And now it's kind of like we're always looking out for the next one, which could be a good thing in the long run, more like less speculative trading and stuff like that. But I guess we'll see.
We're also still feeling the effects of that market because even though like the market crashed and it's back up and we've seen all these record highs, but that money isn't coming back into the real economy because as I mentioned, like median income's down. People are still living at home. People cannot get full-time secure jobs with health benefits and all that. And it's just not coming back to help us. So we're really, really skeptical.
Even personally, like as far as feeling the effects go, my mom bought a house in late 2007. So not super great timing to purchase a house like that. And we are still feeling the effects of like, okay, our house just isn't worth as much as we thought it was when we bought it. And that's something that affects you for
So are you scared
decades.
about housing too? Do you have like a kind of a negative view on actually owning a home too?
I definitely, I want to rent for way longer than most people would want to rent for now, but
I want no business owning a home whatsoever because not only for the cost, not only because A, that money's going to student debt, so it can't actually invest into a home. B, rent, there's so much less to do because there's so much work that involves actually owning a home and actually keeping the value and keeping it going up. And renting also like that instant gratification. When you rent, you sign a lease for a year, then you can go, I'm going to move to this city. I'm going to get those experiences. I'm going to go to another city, get those experiences, or I'm not set in a single place. When you own a home and you're out in like the suburbs of Chicago, well, guess what? You're there for a very, very long time.
You're stuck there. Is that what you're saying?
And then, we've seen that now we all know that the housing market isn't as completely untouchable as people once thought it was. And so not only are you tied down to something for years, which I think is a turnoff to our generation for sure, that its value is not as consistent. It could be, really, the floor could just drop out of it at some point, like it did in 2008, which is another thing that's terrifying.
Yeah. Well,
terrifying might be a little bit of a hard word for it.
It's still
scary.
It's probably scary or just very, very cautious about that sort of investing.
Okay, I'm still depressed talking to both of you, but we can take some lessons away from this, especially for businesses listening. They already know that the millennials are so, keen on the experiences and that they have a short attention span, I guess you could call it. And so they got to, get in there and get right to the point, basically. And that none of you will be investing in these old style companies, at least not yet.
That's not necessarily true, because if you look into it, those older companies who've been around for something like the General Electrics and even like AT&Ts and stuff, they're really stable. They pay out dividends.
They do.
And they're rather valuable.
So maybe in your 30s or when you get another decade from now, maybe you might be more interested
Probably.
in those.
And then even just older industries that we usually mention mine, but even now airplanes now are, like the airline industry is an old industry, but they also have the very cheap actual per share price that you can actually invest into. Their PE ratios are very low, so there's actual value. So those are actually potentially good, both short and long-term stocks to actually invest into and look into. You can look at Lufthansa, Air France, Hawaiian Holdings. Like, these are pretty interesting stocks for people who don't have tons of money to actually look into. But then again, like, do you really want to spend that extra $1,000
right
on this company?
You can start small.
You can start small, but then again, because you're not getting that instant gratification. Like, you put in that $50, that's not increasing by 400% in a week. It's not happening. So that's a put off. Like, we want, I'm going to put that $50 in. I want it to grow to $2,000 in 2 weeks. Well, that's not how investing works.
Wish.
So
if you find out one of those, let me know. I want to get in on it with you guys. But this has been really, really helpful, I think. So I'm glad you decided to stop in and join us this week, because I think it is good to know what the millennials are thinking about stocks in general and investing and housing too, because this is going to affect, how the economy works over the next several decades. And so maybe we'll have to check back in and see, how things are progressing, because hopefully it does get better, because I'm still depressed, but it will.
I'm optimistic overall.
Okay,
so.
good.
I'm not that optimistic.
And I am excited that you can now trade on your phones and all of that. It makes it so much easier. I mean, back in the day, you had to call like someone on the phone and say, I want to buy, and you could only buy 50 or 100 shares. It was just awful. So we're in a whole new environment. Yeah, exactly. And things can only get better from here. So if you want to read more about what Ryan and Andrew write here at Zacks, they're both on the site. You can check out their articles there. My articles are also on Zacks.com. You can listen to our other podcasts and check out what else we've been discussing in the investing world, both on iTunes and on SoundCloud, and of course on Zacks.com. And for Tracey here in Chicago, I'll see you again next week.